Thanks for staying with us here on News Talk. Bruce DePoit with you on this Thursday. Next month, Congress votes on the Iranian nuclear deal, and President Obama is making his strongest argument yet for a yes vote. He says it's the strongest non-proliferation deal ever negotiated, but critics, including many in Congress, aren't yet convinced. Correspondent Emily Schmidt has more on the debate.
President Obama's 50-minute pitch for the Iran nuclear deal, he said, boiled down to two options.
The choice we face is ultimately between diplomacy or some form of war.
Maybe not tomorrow or 3 months from now, he said, but soon. The challenge is that probably even sooner, by mid-September, Congress must vote on the deal.
It's clear this deal is making members of both parties uneasy, and with good reason.
Before Congress even read it, a majority of Republicans declared their virulent opposition.
President Obama said in Washington it's inevitable that any deal, even one worked out with major world leaders, will face scrutiny through a political prism. Critics say that scrutiny is pragmatism about Iran, not politics.
It's difficult to have this trust but verify attitude when we're actually not given the ability to verify how they're verifying.
Congress should reject a bad deal.
Anti-deal advocacy groups are running national ads like this one. Their critics say it's time to stop complaining.
If Congress kills this deal, we will lose more than just constraints on Iran's nuclear program. We will have lost something more precious: America's credibility as a leader of diplomacy.
President Obama said many of the Iran deal opponents supported Iraq intervention. This time, he argued, diplomacy should get its chance before military deployment. In Washington, I'm Emily Schmidt reporting.
Thank you, Emily. And joining us now, former Northern Virginia Congressman Jim Moran. Welcome back. It's always good to see you.
Thank you, Bruce. Always good to be with you.
Thank you very much for your time. I know you were one of the many thousands today who got caught up in the region's transportation snarl. Thanks for your persistence.
You know, when people who drive to work ask, why should my tax money be going to Metro, this is why. We're going to have congestion till 11 o'clock this morning when we're doing this, and it's because Metro isn't functioning. So we're interdependent, and boy, drivers begin to realize how important Metro is when Metro isn't working.
You don't have to take Metro to benefit from it.
That's for sure.
The bottom line.
Yeah.
Eager to get your thoughts on this issue that the president talked about this week, Congressman Moran. Should Congress approve the deal that the U.S. and other nations negotiated with Tehran?
Absolutely. But having said that, they won't. They will reject it, and then the president will veto it, and I'm confident that the Democratic leadership will be able to override the veto, but it's going to be close.
And an agreement like this can pass in that way, in the veto override manner that we think of with conventional legislation?
In this highly partisan context, it's the only way that it will pass.
But I mean, procedurally, this is an option.
Oh, sure. And I think that the White House recognizes that it's a clear option, and that's why the president can't be magnanimous about this. He has to make it clear that there's only one right vote, and those who don't cast that vote in favor of nuclear disarmament of Iran should be held accountable. That this is not a situation that should be seen in any ambivalent way.
So the president made the case that a lot of the critics have been criticizing the deal before it was even arrived at.
That's true.
But to the extent that there is sincere opposition, concern, worry, for the world, for Israel in general.
That's right.
Can you speak to that? Why do you hope that why do you think your former colleagues should approve this deal?
Because there is no other option except for war. Now, some members will be honest about it, and I've heard them say that they would prefer that we go to war with Iran. But because they acknowledge that the only alternative to accepting this deal is going to war with Iran, because if we don't, Iran can either move forward with its nuclear weapon program or we can isolate ourselves along with Israel, and the rest of the world will work with Iran, or Iran will grow economically, and they'll have more latitude. We're the ones who, along with Israel, that have been holding them back. And so, it's time for us to see this in context. We're 4.5% of the world's economy. We're no longer the world's largest economy, and the rest of the world's population and economies are growing at a faster clip than ours is. And so it's incumbent upon us to understand that and to work in an interdependent way with the rest of the free world. This is the classic case where we're doing this. This is as important, or to some extent maybe more important, than the nuclear non-proliferation treaty with Russia. And Russia is on board. China is on board. It's unbelievable that we got the whole rest of the world on board, including the Arab Gulf states, the Sunni states, except for Israel. And now we are going to reject this when we were the ones who showed the leadership in the direction of peace and stability in the Middle East. Rejecting this is wrong, and I feel very strongly about it, because it's really about our children and grandchildren, what kind of world they're going to be living in.
So I have to hit a break in about a minute, but let's play out this notion. We have a minute left in this segment. The notion that we will only know that Iran's nuclear program has been destroyed and is no longer a threat if we, to use Tom Cotton's phrase, bomb them back to day zero.
That's correct. I mean, we could bomb them back to day zero and know that there is no nuclear capacity. But you know, the Ayatollah, the supreme leader of Iran, has said that in English, or I guess it's German words, that nuclear weaponry is verboten. It's wrong, and it's against his religious principles and the principles of Islam. So they want nuclear civilian energy. They're a large company, and they think they have a right to it. But what we're saying is, Israel will be the only country in the Middle East with nuclear weapons, and we're going to keep it at that, and that's why I think this deal should go through.
We'll continue our conversation with former Congressman Jim Moran here on News Channel 8 right after the break. Also, as always, online at news8newstalk.com. Continuing our conversation here on News Talk with former Northern Virginia Congressman Jim Moran. You said before the break, Congressman, as we talked about the congressional consideration of the deal, the agreement that the U.S. and other nations negotiated with Iran, you said that lawmakers should approve the deal when it comes up for a vote, but that they likely will not, or that the majority will not. It does seem to be gaining momentum. Is there the possibility that with his strong speech yesterday and with other back-channel communication that the White House might get the votes it needs?
I find it unlikely. I certainly hope that the White House will, because it would restore my faith in the legislative branch as an institution. Because it used to be that politics ended at the water's edge. We've been working on this Iranian deal for years. And, it's not something that was just sprung on the Congress. So they should have a pretty good idea, if they've been reading along with it, how they were going to vote. I think this is about politics, domestic politics, and which is oftentimes driven by foreign politics. And I just don't see the votes right now. But the president has been very effective. He got trade promotion authority when nobody thought he could. So it's entirely possible. I don't think we should sell him short, and he's all in on this. So it's possible. I just, I wouldn't bet money on it right now. But it is going to go through, because I do think that the Democrats will override the veto.
Having been in,
that will sustain the veto.
Having been in Congress for a long time and understanding the very proper role that the legislative branch has, can you speak to the criticism that they haven't seen enough of the details, that too much of this is on a trust me basis and not, here's what we know, here's what we Here are some of the fine points, the details that could theoretically give folks in the middle more confidence.
But we've always done that. On a tax bill, if we were opposed to it, we said, well, I can't read all this. We've got to read it, and they didn't share it, give us enough time. Trade deal, they said the same thing. They always say that, and I don't want to be too pejorative about the Congress, but the likelihood is that the number of people who actually read the entire deal and make themselves fully informed is probably a pretty small percentage. Now, some will, but most of them will read an executive summary at best. For the most part, it's a matter of hearing from the different interests that converge on this issue and making a political judgment. But it has to be informed enough to justify it, and they're working on that right now, I think.
You've got a great political mind. You've got a great sense of our political system. We've got a big moment teed up tonight, as there are two debates, this second-tier debate early, the main event 9 to 11. What will you be watching for? What potential does tonight have, given that we're so far removed from November 2016, the top 10 Republican candidates on the stage at one time?
Well, Bruce, you're a mainstream moderate, and I'm a Democrat. We're not the audience that they're addressing. We're bystanders on this. And they're not. I'm not sure they're even addressing the mainstream of the Republican Party. They're addressing the activists who are most likely to vote in primaries, and that is almost a minority of the Republican Party itself. And they're particularly addressing those few dozen people who are willing to contribute multi-millions of dollars to these campaigns. So they want to be able to stand out. They want to show that they're the most conservative, that they're willing to buck the Republican leadership. That basically, they have to prove that they're not moderates in order to get the money of these folks that, like the Koch brothers and Ricketts, and I could go, Sheldon Adelson and so on, who don't want moderation.
And we read that there are these billionaire punter types who are currently undecided. Undoubtedly, they're part of the audience that some of these candidates, particularly those who aren't rolling in dough like a Jeb Bush or Donald Trump, that's who they're talking to in part.
No question. I mean, Newt Gingrich went for weeks because Sheldon Adelson supported him. One person kept his presidential campaign alive last time around. Rick Santorum has had a similar experience. If you can get one deep-pocketed individual to fund you, then you can sustain yourself through many of these primaries. If not, then you're probably going to become political detritus, and they want to avoid that.
Do you find that Donald Trump, his enduring surge, are you surprised by this?
I was initially, and then I listened to one of the pollsters had a group of people in New Hampshire just tell them how they felt about candidates, and it was Trump and Carson that they were most attracted to. And when they talked about why they're attracted to Trump, I started to get it. They want independence. They don't trust our government. They want somebody that's going to tell it like it is, even if it isn't that way. You know, they know his name. He's a brand. They watch his show. I mean, he gets 28 million people for the Apprentice thing. So I guess we shouldn't be surprised. But I think this is a shooting star, and shooting stars burn out the fastest.
Always great having you here. We look forward to having you back again really soon. Former Northern Virginia Congressman Jim Moran. Jim, thanks very much for your time. We'll step aside. Back with a program note right after this.